You ever get that gnawing feeling in your gut? You know, the kind that starts as a whisper, like something's off but you can't quite pin it down. Yeah, that was me with Lisa. On the surface, we looked like the perfect couple. Hell, I believed we were. We had been together for years, built a life side by side, shared everything, or at least, I thought we did. But now, looking back, I see just how blind I really was. It began with the little things, these barely noticeable changes in her behavior. At first, I didn't think much of it. I mean, people go through phases, right? She started working late more often, talking about new training sessions, seminars, meetings, stuff she never used to bring up before. I remember asking her one night, why all the extra hours? You've never been this busy before. She brushed it off with some excuse about advancing her career, and like an idiot, I let it slide. But I'll never forget the night everything started to click. I was sitting on the couch, flipping through the TV channels, and Lisa came home way later than usual. She had on this new dress, something way too fancy for a so-called business dinner. Her hair was done differently, like she put in extra effort, almost like she was trying to impress someone. I joked, "What's the deal? Trying to catch someone's eye at work or something?" She laughed it off, but I caught this flicker in her eyes, like I'd gotten a little too close to the truth, and neither of us was ready to admit it. It wasn't just the late nights or the new wardrobe. She became distant, like she had these new interests that didn't include me. We used to do everything together, but suddenly it felt like she was living in a whole different world. I remember her mentioning she'd joined a gym. I didn't think much of it at the time, figured she just wanted to stay fit. But then she started going more and more. When I offered to join her, she shot that down fast. "It's just my time," she'd say. My time? Yeah, okay. Then came the receipts. I'll never forget the day I found those. She had left her purse on the kitchen counter, and I wasn't trying to snoop or anything, but as I was cleaning up, it tipped over. A bunch of receipts spilled out, from restaurants I'd never heard of. Fancy places, too. Now, Lisa has always had a taste for the finer things, but she never mentioned these dinners. Later, I casually asked, "Hey, I saw a receipt from that new place downtown. How was it?" She didn't even flinch, just mumbled something about a work dinner and walked away. That's when it finally clicked, she was hiding something. We started spending less and less time together. We weren't totally ignoring each other, but our conversations got short, strained. I'd ask how her day was, and she'd give me one-word answers, then disappear into the bedroom or head out for another one of her so-called evening runs. Evening runs, my ass. Even my buddy, David, picked up on it. We were having a couple of beers one night, and he looked at me and asked, "Hey man, everything good between you and Lisa? You've seemed off lately." I tried to shrug it off like I'd been doing with everything else, but he wouldn't let it go. "Come on, man. I've known you long enough to see when something's eating at you." I hesitated, but eventually, it all came pouring out, the distance, the late nights, the new clothes, the weird changes. None of it sat right with me. David leaned back in his chair, took a long sip of his beer, and said, "Man, you need to look into that. Doesn't sound good." That's when it hit me like a ton of bricks. My best friend was seeing what I had been too scared to face, something was going on, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. The worst part? She wasn't even trying that hard to hide it. There were nights she'd come home looking worn out, but not the kind of tired you get from a day at the office. No, this was the exhaustion that comes from spending the night with someone who isn't your husband. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to convince myself I was just being paranoid, overthinking everything. But deep down, I knew the truth. I just wasn't ready to face it yet. Then came the conferences, these random out-of-town trips she suddenly had to take. It seemed like every other week, she had some training session or networking event that she just had to attend by herself. How about I tag along? We could turn it into a weekend getaway, I'd suggest. She'd always laugh it off, saying it was strictly for work and there wouldn't be any time for fun. But come on, who was she fooling? I'm no idiot. Something was definitely up, and if I didn't figure it out soon, it was going to drive me crazy. And then, of course, there were the nights out. We used to go out together, grab a bite to eat, maybe catch a movie. But those nights, they started happening less and less. Now she was heading out without me, claiming it was girls' night or she was grabbing drinks with some coworkers. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then it became this routine, too routine. Every week, she'd be out late, and I'd be sitting at home, wondering what in the world was happening to our marriage. I'd bring it up sometimes, but it always ended the same way. "You're overreacting," she'd say, or, "Why can't you just trust me?" She'd turn it around, like I was the problem, like I was some paranoid fool for even asking. And every single time, I'd back off, let it slide. But the doubts? Those never went away. So here I was, a guy who thought he had it all, an amazing wife, a stable life, and suddenly, it all felt like it was slipping through my fingers. And the worst part? I wasn't even sure if any of it had ever been real. After a few more weeks of feeling like I was losing my mind, I couldn't take it anymore. Something was definitely off with Lisa, and it wasn't just the late nights or the fancy new clothes. It was how she treated me, cold, distant, like I was just another person living in the house. No more affection, no more late-night talks, no more, well, nothing. It was like she flipped a switch and everything between us just dried up. I couldn't help myself. I started snooping. I hated that I was doing it, but I didn't feel like I had any other choice. The woman I'd married was slipping away, and I had to know why. One night, while she was in the shower, I grabbed her phone. Just a quick look, I told myself. But what I found? Man, that's when my whole world came crashing down. There was a message thread buried under some random work contact, a guy named Alex. At first, I figured it was just another colleague, no big deal, but as I kept scrolling, I realized this wasn't work-related. Not even close. The messages started out flirty, playful even, but the further I scrolled, the more explicit they got. Real explicit. My hands were shaking as I read through their plans to meet up, their late-night chats about how excited they were to see each other again. And then the pictures, yeah, there were pictures. Lisa in lingerie, Alex posing shirtless like some gym-obsessed 20-something. I felt sick to my stomach, but instead of losing it right then and there, I did something I never thought I would. I took a deep breath, saved the messages, and put the phone back like nothing happened. I didn't confront her. Not yet. That's when I realized I needed more. Real proof. Not just texts. I wasn't going into this blind. So I did what any suspicious, desperate husband would do, I set up cameras. Yeah, I know how that sounds, but I didn't care. I needed to know the truth. So I went out, bought a few hidden cameras, and installed them around the house when she wasn't home. One in the living room, one in the kitchen, and yeah, one in the bedroom. I wasn't proud of it, but I had to see what was going on when I wasn't around. For the first few days. Nothing. Just Lisa doing her usual thing, coming home late, heading straight to bed without even bothering to say goodnight. But then, about a week later, it happened. She told me she had to stay late at work again, something about a meeting with a client. I didn't believe her for a second, but I played along. I kissed her goodbye, told her to take care, and then sat down in front of my laptop, waiting to see what the footage would show. Hours passed, nothing. The house stayed empty. But then, right around 9 p.m., I saw him. Alex. The bastard walked straight into my house like he owned the place. And Lisa? She was right there behind him, all smiles and giggles like a teenager with a crush. I sat there, staring at the screen, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst, watching them head straight into our bedroom. It didn't take long for things to escalate. They didn't even try to hide it. Right there, in the bed we shared, she was with him. My wife, with another man. I felt like I was going to be sick, physically sick. Every instinct in me screamed to rush over there, throw them both out, yell in her face, but I couldn't move. I just sat there, frozen, watching my entire world crumble in real time. It felt like I was trapped in some nightmare I couldn't wake up from. When they were done, yeah, they stayed for a while because why wouldn't they? Alex didn't even bother sticking around. He zipped up, kissed her, and casually walked out like it was just another normal evening. And Lisa? No guilt. Not even a flicker. She simply cleaned up, got dressed, and headed back to her late-night work meeting like nothing had happened. I couldn't believe it. The woman I'd spent years with, the woman I thought I'd grow old with, was sleeping with some younger guy in our bed like it was just a regular Tuesday night. And that's when the anger set in. I'm not talking about the kind of anger where you punch a wall or throw something. No, this was a deep, burning rage. The kind that eats at you from the inside out, the kind that makes your blood boil and your skin crawl. I knew then that this wasn't just about her betrayal. This was about making her pay for what she did to me. But I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. I wasn't stupid. I needed to plan. I needed to completely destroy her. So, the next morning, I went about my day like nothing had changed. Lisa was all smiles, kissed me on the cheek before heading off to her beloved fitness center, which, by the way, I now knew was just an excuse to meet up with Alex. I played along, nodded, wished her a good workout, and the moment she walked out the door, I got to work. First thing I did was check her phone again. More messages. They were planning a getaway together, a trip she had told me was a work conference next month. But surprise, surprise, it wasn't work-related at all. Just her and Alex, off to some fancy hotel for the weekend while I stayed home playing the fool. I wasn't about to let that happen. Not without putting up a fight. So I started gathering everything. Every single message. Every photo. Every piece of dirt I could dig up. I wasn't going to sit around and let this go unnoticed. When everything blew up, I was going to make sure the damage was absolute. I started tracking her movements too. I installed a GPS on her phone without her even knowing, watched every step she took. Every time she went to the gym. Every time she met up with Alex. I wasn't going to miss a thing. And the worst part? I still hadn't confronted her. Not because I didn't want to, but because I wanted her to feel the same level of hurt she was putting me through. And trust me, I had a plan. She had no idea what was coming. But the day of reckoning was near. And when it hit, there'd be no going back. I had everything I needed now. I'd seen it with my own eyes, Lisa and Alex in my bed, acting like it belonged to them. The texts, the pictures, the lies, I had all the proof. But instead of blowing up on her, instead of screaming like I wanted to, I knew I had to be smart about this. I couldn't just lose control, no matter how badly I wanted to. I needed to ruin her completely. And for that, I needed time and patience. So I kept digging. I went back through her phone, taking screenshots of every filthy message, every picture. I saved all the videos from the hidden cameras, labeling them for later. I even snapped pictures of every shady receipt she'd stuffed in her purse. Hotel reservations, fancy dinners she never mentioned, everything got documented. If she was going to blow up my life, then I was going to blow up hers tenfold. But here's the twist, while all of this was happening, I started getting closer to someone I never expected, Megan. She'd been a coworker of mine for a few years, always friendly, always kind. We had never crossed any lines before, but she'd been dropping hints for a while. And with everything going down with Lisa, I found myself leaning on her more and more. It began innocently enough. We'd grab a coffee after work, just talk about life, vent about the usual stress at work, nothing serious. But the more time I spent with her, the more I realized how easy it was to be around her. She didn't have that cold, distant energy that Lisa had been throwing my way for months. Megan listened. She cared. And yeah, she was clearly interested in me. I saw it in the way she'd smile when I spoke, the way her hand would linger just a second too long when we said goodbye. At first, I didn't want to drag her into all of this mess. I thought it'd just make things more complicated, but the truth was, I needed someone in my corner. Someone who wasn't just standing by, watching my life fall apart from a distance. And Megan? She was more than ready to be that person. She became my emotional support, my sounding board. And slowly, things shifted. It wasn't just about grabbing coffee anymore. One night, after a few too many drinks, I told her everything. I didn't hold back, I spilled it all. The affair, the cameras, the lies. I half expected her to freak out, maybe even distance herself from me. But she didn't. If anything, she got closer. "Jake, you don't deserve this," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You deserve someone who actually respects you. Someone who cares." She's garbage. I'm not going to lie, hearing someone say that out loud about Lisa. It felt damn good. Real good. It wasn't long before Megan became a key part of my plan for revenge. At first, it was just little things. I'd tell her about the latest piece of evidence I'd found, the new messages Lisa and Alex were exchanging. We'd laugh at how pathetic they both were, how clueless Lisa was. But as time went on, I realized Megan could play a bigger role in all of this. She wanted to help, and honestly, I wanted her to. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on Lisa's every move. I had GPS set up on her phone now, so I could track her whenever I needed to. Turns out, Alex wasn't just some random fling. They were seeing each other regularly, at the gym, at the same restaurants, at his place. I learned their routine, figured out when and where they were meeting. It was like some twisted game of cat and mouse, and I was determined to win. There were a few close calls, though. Moments that made me want to punch Alex right in the face. One time, I ran into him at the gym. I wasn't expecting it, but there he was, lifting weights like he didn't have a care in the world. He didn't recognize me, of course, but I sure as hell knew who he was. Watching him joke around with his buddies while he was sleeping with my wife behind my back, it took everything I had not to confront him then and there. Then there was the time at work. Lisa and Alex had some event or meeting, I wasn't sure, but they were both there, acting all professional like nothing was going on. I watched from across the room, seeing them share these little inside jokes, flirting like they were the only two people in the world. The tension in the air was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. But I kept my cool. I wasn't ready to make my move yet. But I would be. Soon. And all the while, Megan and I kept growing closer. What started as emotional support had turned into something more. It's funny how life works, isn't it? There I was, watching my marriage disintegrate right before my eyes, but at the same time, I was building something new with someone who actually gave a damn about me. One night, after a long, exhausting day of pretending everything was fine with Lisa, Megan invited me over for dinner. I could tell this was more than just a casual dinner invite. We both knew where this was heading. And when I showed up at her place, there was no pretending anymore. The conversation flowed, the wine flowed, and before I knew it, I was in her bed. It wasn't just about the physical part. It was everything Lisa had stopped giving me: warmth, affection, care. For the first time in ages, I felt wanted. I felt alive. And yeah, maybe it was part of my revenge too. Maybe I needed to hold on to something Lisa couldn't take away from me, someone who was on my side, who actually cared. Megan was all of that and more. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I kept collecting evidence. I knew where Lisa and Alex were going next. They had a trip planned, some work conference in another city. But now I had the details. The hotel, the dates, I knew exactly what they were up to. And when the time was right, I was going to drop the hammer on both of them. And Megan? She'd be right there with me every step of the way. I'd been sitting on all that evidence for weeks, just waiting for the right moment to use it, the texts, the photos, the videos, every dirty little secret Lisa thought she was hiding from me, all stored neatly on my phone, ready to blow her life apart. 100 times I thought about confronting her, throwing everything in her face, watching her fall apart. But that wasn't enough. She deserved something far worse. The idea struck me one night as I lay in bed, replaying everything in my mind. It hit me that destroying her wasn't just about a divorce or making her pay financially. No, I wanted to ruin her reputation. I wanted everyone to know exactly what kind of person she was, a cheating, lying woman who thought she could play me for a fool. So, I decided to make it all public. At first, it sounded insane. Who does something like that, right? But then again, who sets up cameras in their own house to catch their wife cheating? I was way past the point of normal. So I spent the next few days carefully plotting out my revenge. I gathered it all, screenshots of their texts, pictures of Lisa and Alex together, videos from the hidden cameras. I even included receipts from their fancy dinners and hotel stays, anything that painted a clear picture of what she'd been up to behind my back. Once I had everything in place, I created some anonymous accounts on social media and a few of those shady forums where people love to gossip about this sort of thing. I wasn't about to dump everything at once, though. No, that would have been too obvious. I wanted it to spread slowly, like a virus. So I started small, just a couple of text messages. I posted them in a forum under the title, "Guess What My Wife Has Been Doing." I didn't even mention Lisa by name. I let the screenshots speak for themselves. At first, it was quiet. A few comments trickled in, some people calling her names, others sympathizing with the anonymous husband. It almost felt like a letdown. But then, I dropped the big one. The video. Just a short clip, only a few seconds, of Lisa and Alex in our bedroom, doing what they did best. I posted it with the caption, "Caught red-handed." That's when things really took off. It didn't take long for the video to spread. Faster than I could have imagined. People started sharing it, reposting it, and before I knew it, the video had gone viral. At first, no one knew who Lisa was, but the internet has a way of uncovering secrets. By the end of the day, someone had recognized her. Maybe it was a coworker, an old friend, I'll never know. But once her name was out there, the floodgates opened. People began tagging her friends, her colleagues, even her family. It was like watching a wildfire tear through her social circle. Slowly but surely, the scandal reached everyone important in her life. And the very next day, I saw the first cracks start to form. When I got home from work, Lisa was on the phone, pacing back and forth in the kitchen. Her face was pale, her voice shaky. "What do you mean it's online?" she kept asking, sounding more panicked by the second. I didn't need to hear the other side of the conversation to know exactly what was happening. Someone had sent her the video. Someone had seen the texts. The guilt was finally catching up to her. She hung up, her hands trembling, and I could see the fear in her eyes as she checked her phone, scrolling through messages and social media. Her whole world was starting to unravel, and she had no clue I was the one pulling the strings. Then the phone calls started rolling in. The first one was from her boss. I was in the next room when I heard her desperately trying to explain herself. "It's not what it looks like, I swear, I can explain," she pleaded, her voice cracking. But what could she possibly say? That it wasn't her in the video? That it was all just a big misunderstanding? It was pathetic, watching her try to salvage what little dignity she had left. Over the next few days, things only got worse. The scandal spread like wildfire at her workplace. Her coworkers began calling, asking questions, distancing themselves from her. People she once called friends were now pretending they didn't know her, unfollowing her on social media, cutting her off completely. And the best part? Alex. The minute things blew up, that coward distanced himself as fast as he could. He wanted no part of the fallout. I overheard one of their phone conversations. Lisa was crying, practically begging him to stand by her, but he wasn't having any of it. "Lisa, I can't do this," he said, his voice cold and detached. "I've got too much on the line. I can't be tied to this kind of mess." I almost laughed out loud. Watching the guy bail on her was like sweet justice playing out in real time. Seeing Lisa's life unravel right in front of me, I won't lie, it felt good. Really good. Every time she got another phone call, every time she checked her phone and saw another comment, another message from someone cutting ties with her, I felt this deep sense of satisfaction. She was finally getting what she deserved. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. As the scandal grew, Lisa's job was hanging by a thread. It didn't take long before her boss gave her a stern warning. "We can't have this kind of behavior reflecting on the company," I heard him say during one of her frantic phone calls. I knew it was only a matter of time before she'd be out of a job completely. Of course, she tried to fight it. She went to HR, played the victim, but there was no escaping it. The evidence was too damning. This wasn't some baseless rumor, it was undeniable proof. The pictures, the videos, the texts. She had no defense. Not even her own tears could save her. The day she got fired, I knew right away. I walked in to find her sitting at the kitchen table, her head in her hands, sobbing. "They let me go," she whispered, barely able to lift her eyes. "I lost my job." I didn't say a word. I just stood there, watching her crumble. This woman who had completely destroyed our marriage, who had betrayed me in every imaginable way, was finally facing the consequences. And the best part? She still didn't know I was the one pulling all the strings. She thought it was just some random leak, a mistake that had spiraled out of control. Jamie had already cut ties. He was barely even answering her calls anymore, let alone showing his face. She was on her own, and she knew it. And as for me, I wasn't done yet. There was still one final move left, one more piece to complete the puzzle. And when I played it, there'd be no coming back for her. By the time Lisa finally tried to talk to me, it was too late. The damage was done, and there was no fixing it. I had watched her world collapse around her, her job gone, her friends abandoning her one by one, and Jamie. He was long gone. The second the scandal hit full force, he ditched her without a second thought. She was alone. Desperate. And finally, after all that, she came crawling back, looking for some kind of redemption. It was almost pitiful. She sat me down one evening, tears streaming down her face, and launched into the usual routine. How sorry she was, how she never meant to hurt me, how she had made a mistake. It was laughable. There she was, sitting across from me, trying to spin this story like everything could be undone with a few tears and half-hearted apologies. Like the texts, the videos, the affair with Alex, it could all just disappear. She even tried to paint herself as the victim, going on about how stressful things had been at work, how it had pushed her to do things she regretted. I nearly walked out of the room, but I stayed for one reason: I wanted to hear her beg. And beg she did. "Jake, please, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. You have to believe me." Her voice cracked as she reached for my hand. "We can work through this. We can." I pulled my hand away before she could touch me, the coldness in my own voice surprising even me. "There's nothing to work through, Lisa. It's over." I didn't care about her excuses. I didn't care to hear her rewrite the story. I had already made up my mind the moment I saw Alex walk into our bedroom weeks ago, probably even before that. There was no going back. No forgiveness. She had destroyed our marriage, and now, she was going to lose everything else, too. When I told her I had already filed for divorce, she didn't take it well. She cried, begged, tried to guilt-trip me into reconsidering. But I didn't waver. It was over. And I had made sure this divorce would be swift and brutal. I had all the ammunition I needed, the texts, the videos, the receipts. This wasn't going to be a clean break. I was going to take everything. And she knew it. The legal process was a nightmare for her. She tried to fight it, of course. She met with several lawyers, trying to figure out how to hold on to her share of our assets. But I was always one step ahead. Every time she thought she had a chance, I hit her with more proof. In court, I laid it all out, methodically, with no mercy. The judge didn't even need much time to deliberate. With all the evidence stacked in my favor, it was clear who the real victim was. She lost nearly everything we'd built together. Our shared property. Gone. The house. It was mine. Our savings. I made sure she walked away with as little as possible. I wasn't being petty, I was making sure she felt the full weight of the consequences. Meanwhile, Lisa was scrambling, trying desperately to hold on to what little she had left. She reached out to her friends for support, but nobody wanted anything to do with her anymore. She had become toxic, and everyone around her knew it. The few friends who hadn't already ghosted her quickly turned their backs once they saw the evidence for themselves. I made sure they saw it. I wasn't just tearing her life apart. I was erasing her from mine, and from everyone else's too. Lisa's downfall wasn't just personal, it was absolute. Every day, her life fell apart a little more. Her reputation was shattered beyond repair, her friends abandoned her, and as for Alex, he'd been long gone. The second things got messy, he bolted, leaving her to deal with the fallout alone. I overheard some of their last phone conversations, her voice trembling with desperation, practically begging him to stick by her. But Alex? He was cold, distant, more interested in protecting himself than facing the wreckage they'd created together. "Lisa, I can't do this anymore," he said one night. "You've ruined everything, and I can't let myself get dragged down with you." Exactly what I expected from him. A coward, right to the end, running the moment things got tough, leaving her to clean up the mess by herself. She had no one left. Not me, not Alex, not even her so-called friends. She was trapped, isolated, and desperate. As for me, I was moving on. By the time the divorce was finalized, Lisa had nothing. No job, no friends, no future. She had lost everything that mattered to her, everything she thought she could hold on to by betraying me. The divorce process, though swift, was brutal for her. She tried to negotiate, tried to cling to some shred of dignity, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. Every lie, every betrayal, every dirty little secret, exposed for all to see. She was humiliated, and there was no escape from it. And me? I was ready for a fresh start. I bought a new house, small, but it was mine. A clean break from the past. Lisa could keep the memories, the guilt, and the mess she'd created. I didn't need any of it. I didn't want any of it. And through it all, Megan had been my rock. What started as emotional support had turned into something real. She was there for me during the worst of it, steady and dependable. Whenever I felt like I was spiraling, she was there to remind me that none of this was my fault. I wasn't the one who had destroyed my marriage. Lisa made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. As the divorce dragged on, Megan and I spent more and more time together. She'd come over after work, cook dinner, and we'd talk about anything but Lisa. It was like the storm in my life had finally cleared, and Megan was the calm after it all. I didn't expect to be ready for something new so soon, but with her, it just felt right. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about using her to hurt Lisa. It was genuine. The day the divorce was finalized, Megan and I celebrated, nothing flashy, just a quiet evening at my new place with a bottle of wine and the satisfaction that I was finally free. Free from the lies, the betrayal, and the toxic mess that had been my marriage to Lisa. Lisa tried reaching out to me a few times after that, but I never responded. There was nothing left to say. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with them. She was alone, disgraced, and I had moved on. And honestly, it felt good. Really good. That day, when the divorce papers were finalized, it felt like stepping out of a long, dark tunnel. I remember standing outside the courthouse with the papers in my hand, just staring at them for a moment before tucking them away. It was finally over. The weight I had been carrying for months, maybe even years, was lifted. I was free from Lisa, free from the lies, the cheating, the whole toxic mess our life had become. And the best part? I wasn't alone. Megan was there beside me, smiling in that quiet, reassuring way of hers. She never gloated, never acted like this was some victory for her. She just stood by me, supported me through all of it, and kept me grounded when I felt like everything was spinning out of control. That's when I realized this wasn't just some rebound. Megan was real, and she was in it for the long haul. We decided it was time for a real fresh start. Staying in the same city, surrounded by all the old memories and places that reminded me of Lisa, it didn't make sense. So Megan and I made a plan. We packed up, found a new place in a different city, and within a few months, we were gone. Just like that, I left behind the ghost of my old life. No more Lisa. No more drama. Just a clean slate. Moving in with Megan felt like a breath of fresh air. We found this small, cozy house. It wasn't extravagant, but it was ours. Together, we settled into a new routine, something easy, something that felt peaceful. No more tension, no more waiting for the other shoe to drop. It was just life, simple and good. That's when it hit me how much I had been holding on to. All that anger, all that pain from the past, it was finally gone. I didn't feel bitter anymore. I wasn't constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for something to blow up. Lisa was just a chapter that had ended, and I had finally turned the page. A few months after the move, I started my own business. It was a small marketing firm, something I had dreamed of doing for years but never had the time or maybe the courage to pursue. With Megan's encouragement, I went for it, and it paid off. Sure, business was slow at first, but it gradually picked up. It gave me a sense of purpose again, something to invest myself in that wasn't clouded by the mess of my past. Occasionally, I'd catch up with some old friends. They had seen me at my worst during the breakdown of my marriage, the endless anger, the sleepless nights. But now, they saw a different version of me. They saw someone who had come out stronger, more at peace. They met Megan and instantly liked her. One night, over drinks, my buddy Chris pulled me aside, grinning like an idiot. "Man, you look happier than I've seen you in years," he said, clinking his beer against mine. "You did good." And yeah, I had to agree with him. I was happier. I had my life back. But more than that, I had something better. I had Megan. I had a business that was taking off. I had a future that wasn't tainted by the bitterness and betrayal of my marriage to Lisa. As for Lisa, she wasn't doing so well. I'd hear bits and pieces from people. She tried to pick up the pieces of her life after the scandal, but her reputation was ruined. The video, the messages, they were still out there, haunting her at every turn. She'd lost her job, most of her friends had cut her off, and Alex, he'd been gone for a while. Once things got ugly, he made sure to disappear completely. She tried reaching out to her old colleagues, hoping to salvage her career, but every door she knocked on slammed shut. No one wanted to be associated with her anymore. There was one last time she tried to contact me. It didn't surprise me. Lisa was desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. She sent me a long email, pages of it, apologizing, talking about how much she regretted everything, how she had lost everything and had no one left. She wanted to meet, to talk, to see if we could find some way to make peace. I stared at that email for a long time, thinking about everything that had gone down between us. But in the end, I didn't bother replying. There was no need. I didn't hate her anymore, I just didn't care. She was part of my past, a chapter that was over, and I had no interest in revisiting it. I deleted the email, blocked her, and that was the end of it. And honestly, it felt great. Megan and I settled into our new life like we had been living it for years. I'd wake up in the morning, have coffee with her before heading off to work, and everything just felt normal. I wasn't haunted by what Lisa had done anymore. I wasn't holding on to that anger or bitterness. It was all behind me, and I was free. Some nights, Megan and I would talk about the future, where we travel, what we wanted to do with our business, and maybe even starting a family one day. Everything felt possible now. The weight of the past wasn't holding me down anymore. I had a fresh start, and it was more than I ever thought I'd have again. As for Lisa, she was just a memory. A mistake I had learned from. And that's all she'd ever be.